for the fifth and final episode of our webinar series. Today we're going to be discussing decarbonisation, and for the final time I am joined by Rob Bressler, who is an associate of PECT and also an accredited carbon reporting manager. Thank you.
Cheers, Danny. Yes, so we've talked about global warming, we've talked about carbon dioxide equivalents, we've talked about all these different things, but the key to actually making change is going through some decarbonisation initiatives. So in this webinar, we're just going to talk about a few different things that your organisation may want to consider, and there's some quick wins to help you get there. So what do we mean by decarbonisation? Well, it's effectively putting in those actions that will reduce your emissions of greenhouse gases, whether that be your scope 1, 2 or 3 emissions. So I'm going to go through a few of these different examples in turn. So an easy one to do that's quite cheap and simple is moving to a renewable energy tariff. A lot of the time it's actually completely cost neutral. It's just a matter of phoning up your energy provider and making sure that you've moved along to a tariff that is based on renewables. It's the easiest way to reduce your emissions without any cost to yourself, and it's literally a flick of the switch by that energy company. An energy company doing that forces their hand to invest more and more in more renewables. So very simple to do. Sustainable transport. This is also this can be quite simple to do. So encouraging your employees to use public transport, providing parking spaces for car sharing, getting a sustainable transport policy in place. So is there a cycle to work scheme you can do? All of these different things. So lots of different things you can help to encourage your employees to be more sustainable, implementing EV charging units, these kind of things. Waste and resource management. So making sure that you're segregating your waste, that your materials are being recycled, so you can maintain that embodied carbon for waste. So going to recycling banks within your office rather than having individual dustbins is the best way to help people to actually force them to go somewhere else and do that waste segregation. So simple tricks that can save yourself time and money, and hopefully save you costs on waste as well. So moving to different heating as well. So there's a lot of talk now about heat pumps, lots of good grants available for heat pumps. So if you can move away from using oil heating, gas heating, and moving over to a heat pump can be a very good way, particularly if you're on that renewable tariff as well for your electricity. So other ones we've got here, so efficient fleet. So if you have your own vehicles, again, are there leases available? Can you move over to an EV vehicle fleet where possible? And there's lots more EVs out there now in terms of not just for your own transport for meetings, but also for carriage of goods, and things like e-bikes and delivery vehicles are really coming through now. Installing your own energy. So again, if you're lucky enough to have your own roof space or when you're warehousing your own offices, lots you can do in terms of putting solar PV on your buildings, and the price of these have really come down and can have quite a good payback period. There's also lots of technology out there for battery storage as well, so you can actually store some of that energy yourselves and use that at peak times when you need it. Insulation. Really cheap, really quick to do. So can you reduce your heat loss for your building by putting in draft excluders, putting double glazing in, putting extra layers of insulation in your roof space? These things should be done first before you start moving over to putting in new air conditioning units or heat pumps. If you've got a leaky building, you'll be wasting a lot of those efforts. So really simple and quick to do. And I think finally we've got one on water. So can you put in low flow taps? Have foaming taps that can do that. Do you need to have Niagara Falls coming out of the taps when you're washing your hands? A lot of the time you don't. And there's other things you can do, like water harvesting as well. Water butts, grey water harvesting. Lots of things you can do to save water that will also have an impact on your carbon footprint on the whole. So this is quite an interesting slide when we're talking about decarbonisation. It's talking about front loading your activities. So I'll just explain this slide a little bit. We've got two scenarios here. So this lighter blue line on the bottom is where we've front loaded our decarbonisation activities. This is where they've made efforts to get their carbon footprint and down as soon as possible, as quickly as possible, to hit their net zero target here. Scenario 2 is where they've used a slower plan, a slower type trajectory to decarbonise. So they've done some activities, but their effect has been lower, and then they've had to do a lot more at the very end to meet that net zero. Now, in that period between scenario 1 and scenario 2, all these tons of carbon in between in this area here where I'm moving my mouse, that's all additional carbon dioxide that's gone to the atmosphere that necessarily didn't have to occur if they'd have put those efforts in first. So I kind of look at this as kind of like looking at your pension pot. If you've made the effort to save money early doors, invest on that and get that compound interest, you're going to have a far more comfortable time to get to your desired retirement at net zero than you will be if you haven't put the effort to put those savings in early doors. You're going to have to save a lot more money and you may not get there. So front loading is the way to do this. Okay, now not all of these things can be done overnight, but when it comes to front loading your decarbonisation activities, you should look at doing the things you can do in the near term. So what can you do to help reduce these scope 1 and 2 emissions early on? So these are the ones you need to act on. So like I say, changing your tariff, insulating your buildings, reducing drafts, getting a handle on your waste. These things can be done quickly, and you need to put plans in place very, very soon over this near term. So these are where we should have a fully formed plan over the next 1 to 5 years. When it comes to scope 3 emissions or longer term, medium term things, you may not be able to do this straight away. You may need to build a business plan to do this. You may need to do some research on how you're going to do that. So you should start looking at things in terms of longer term investments. Start investigating what technologies may be out there, and start doing your research on how you can get to this in the kind of the medium term. When it comes to longer term stuff, when we're looking at our 2050 aspirations, you may just want to get a clear outline, start thinking about this, start discussing it, and start considering what technologies are out on the horizon, whether that be hydrogen, fuel cells, all these kind of things that may be useful to you but aren't there yet. But start moving and considering your plans on how you can get there in the future. So key thing is do what you can now in this near term, short term decarbonising, and start thinking about and putting plans in place for these longer term plans. And this is where you really need to start looking at your carbon footprint, understanding where your emissions are, and then where you can get your best return on investment to putting these things in. So a couple of examples we've got here. So if you're looking at putting in air source heat pumps or ground source heat pumps, it's really important not to spend that money frivolously on a building that's going to be leaking a load of heat through poor draft exclusion or not having enough insulation. So do the things that you can do quickly and cheaply first, like insulating that building, before you make the investment on these other areas. So another example, you may want to be looking at putting in new LED lighting in here into your building and investing in PIR sensors. However, there's some really cheap and quick wins. It may be that you can improve your skylights, you can clean the windows in your warehouse, and make a lot more use of natural daylight rather than actually having to invest on things that are going to use electricity. So it's a matter of just using a bit of common sense, but considering some of these things before you spend money unnecessarily. So Danny, were there any questions about any of this?
Yes, there was. So what is the best way to capture and monitor carbon data to be able to input it into a calculator? Where do businesses start?
So yeah, people get a bit concerned when it comes to that carbon data because it's not easy to come by, but the carbon bit is the easy bit. That's easily calculated from your utility bills. So get your electricity bill, get your quarterly meters readings, whatever it may be, but start pulling a folder together of things from your electricity provider. Or if you're in a rented office, and your bills may be part of your rent, maybe already cover all of your bills, but you should be able to go back to your your landlord and say, well, what is what am I paying for here? How much energy am I producing? Go to them and ask them for that information. It can be, like I say, it could just be an annual bill, quarterly bill. Depending on where you are, you may even get daily or half hourly readings, but start pulling that together into a folder, start getting into a way that you understand it. And if you can't understand it, go back to your provider and ask them to explain it to you. They've got an obligation to do that for you. So pull that data together, speak to us at PECT, and we can help pull that together and convert that into a carbon footprint for you. There may be some gaps in that data, but don't worry about it. You can actually look at that and consider where these data gaps are and make some estimates. But the first thing to do is get that data, and you can get smarter and cleaner data as you go forward. But that data will help you get that baseline, get a trajectory, and see where you're going in the future.
Absolutely. The best action you can do is to start. Absolutely. And a final question is, often when we talk about decarbonisation, we discuss quick wins or cheap fixes. When businesses are looking to invest in their future, what is the best way to start thinking about longer term plans for decarbonisation?
So I would speak to your peers, your trade associations, see what other businesses have done in your sector. There's quite a wealth of case studies that are actually on the PEC website that you can go to from other projects that they've done, the ones that have been successful. It's not one size fits all. It depends on your building. It depends on the type of building you are, the type of fleet that you've got, and the return on investment and where you're at. So we can help you with all of that, and we can also point you in the direction of other information, other sources of information that can find the solution that meets your needs.
Thank you very much for your time, Rob, and that concludes this series. Thank you very much for coming along, and we hope to see you on the next one. Thank you.
Thanks.